Cool, and I see Matt's joined us. Kia ora, Matt. So we're moving from a national big picture innovation topic now back down to something a little bit more in our backyard. And Matthew Calder is going to jump on and talk to us about what's happening out in Waipoua and how they're protecting our native species out there. So I'll hand over to you, Matt. It's all yours.
Yeah, morena koutou. My name's Matthew Calder. I work for the Kauri Coast District Office of DOC. I started off 20 years ago in the Waipoua forest when DOC was still based there, and I'm going to talk about Waipoua, and there's going to be a lot of synergy with the great presentation from the Tito Whenua team. So I'm going to share the screen now. Has this coming through good?
Yeah, do you want to pop it into presentation mode?
Sure.
Perfect.
Oopsie daisy. Hold on, let me go back to the start. You can see I spend a bit more time in the forest than I do presenting, but I'm going to talk about possum, rat and stoat control in Waipoua over the years. I'm going to summarize some of the work that's happened since 1990 that's got us where we are today. But it's been guided, especially in recent years, by the Mahi Tahi principle. Our department and Te Iwi Te Roroa work together on everything that happens in Waipoua, and that's been formalised in the 2008 treaty settlement and recognised in a Mahi Tahi document that was signed 2 years ago. And so we work very closely with the team there, including the Tito Whenua team. And I was going to be joined today by Snow Tane, who's the operations manager, but he's double, if not triple booked. So he gives his apologies, but he's been an inspirational leader in conservation amongst many other things. So hopefully we can hear from him from a later date. But a lot of the work we do has these kind of principles of design and control work that does not put Kauri at risk. Waipoua has it does have the most amount of Kauri dieback anywhere in the north, I would say, and it's got that as something that we're working on principally with Te Roroa and that they are leading work on. So that's in not the background, that's in the foreground. We have kokako and kiwi as indicators of forest bird vitality that I'll get more into, but we've got the kokako of rata, totara and kohekohe that are the indicators of forestry health. So the Waipoua is a globally significant Kauri forest, but it also is a significant area for rata, totara, swamp maori, kohekohe, amongst a lot of other tree species that are quite palatable to possums and quite susceptible from interference from rodents and possums on their flowering and fruiting, as well as their foliage. There's a picture of the upper Waipoua, so different than the Kauri forest around Tane. It's all big emergent rimu rata over a towai maka canopy. So most of Waipoua is probably in this space, like there's Kauri through the central part of it, but the upper part is all a different forest with a different threat matrix. Obviously not Kauri dieback, but it's got different elements that threaten it. Waipoua also has a relic kokako population as well as a strong kiwi recovery focus. So kokako, after they were first monitored in 1989 at 5 pairs, have been a focus of a lot of work. Where we are here is the northeast of Waipoua. We're at the upper Waimamaku, which flows into the Waimamaku township over here. And all of these lines here are bait station lines where we have annual ground control that occurs during the nesting season, following advice from the kokako recovery group. And the red dots are kokako territories as at 2016. We've done more recent survey work since then, but that's still getting finalised. A lot of predator control happens in Waipoua for both kiwi and kokako, and here's a bit of local hero, Tom Donovan, talking about a lot of that stuff that Liam was articulating before with protecting Kauri with overboots, signs to tell the trappers when they put overbooties on while they do their important work of checking the traps. And this is Tom in the lower Waipoua here, but in the wider landscape, all of these dots are double set DOC 200 traps, and this map is now outdated, and Kaitiaki Kiwi are a community group that's made up of the Iwi Te Roroa Native Forest Restoration Trust, Waipoua Forest Trust, DOC, and a number of others have since expanded that predator control through to that coastal part of Waipoua. So this has already been outdated, but it includes up in the distance in the Waimā Forest, as well as the kokako area in the mid area, and the kiwi recovery focal point is in the lower part of Waipoua in the middle. The first landscape small exotic mammal control was to reduce possum impact. This was an aerial 1080 and 1990. And what drove that was the clear decline of possum palatable species that was quite evident by the 80s after they'd had 20 years of establishing. And northern rata was quite susceptible, and a big monitoring program occurred. So before the control, then after the control, the pictures don't really do it justice, but what they're able to demonstrate from pre-control 1990 through to 2006, when this rata monitoring wrapped up, was the amount of nil browse and the recovery of rata species using periodic 1080. And with that first 1990 work, it was the first big aerial 1080 in the north. I think it might have been the first full stop in the north. There was a lot of work the department did in understanding the other impacts that went with it, including the kokako area to the top. There was fernbird, there was pupurangi, there was water samples. So a lot of work was put in to understand what are the other impacts. We know that it's possibly going to manage possum to very low numbers, but let's understand a bit more about it. After that first aerial 1080 in 1990, the shift went through to ground control, dividing up the Waipoua into blocks where staff and performance-based contractors were, paid and instructed to get blocks to very low levels for possum, and then they'd move to the next, using leakhold trapping, ground-laid toxins like the potassium cyanide Liam was talking about, and also ground-based 1080. And here's a picture that shows how they broke it up. And this happened to all of the big forests in Upper North Island and large parts of the country, where they'd break them up into blocks, and as much as budgets allowed, they would treat as many blocks using generally performance-based contractors that only got paid when they got possums to under normally 5% using leg hold method. So it worked really good, and some of the best trappers in the country came out of this program where they were paid to do the work, otherwise they didn't get paid. But it just wasn't able to get that impact over that landscape in one hit. It took sort of 3 to 4 years to get around those rotational blocks. So in spring 2005 and again in 2011, another aerial 1080 occurred. This time, 1080's benefit to rodents and stoats was better understood, and as well as being about leaves on trees, it was about rodents. And so rodents were monitored over a big monitoring network that I helped Tom work on back when he worked for DOC. So some really good data came out of that, and that showed that for the duration of the forest bird nesting season, a 1080, if it was well timed, would keep rodents to sort of low to very low throughout that period. And that was demonstrated in 2005 and 2011. And this is just outlining the extent of the 2005 operation, which is to show that it covered all of what was pretty much the public conservation lands of Waipoua, but also a state of the Waipoua Forest Trust and Native Forest Restoration Trust. This year again, in fact, just last month, we did another 14,000 hectares of the Waipoua. And this is a map that shows where it all fits in. So the Tito Whenua ground possum control, which I got to say is an inspirational project, is in that sort of central western area. The kokako management area is in the very eastern part of the Waipoua. And the green there is public conservation land. We ended up doing more 1080 than this map would show in some areas, but less in others. This was just a sort of starting point. But in the end, we did 14,000 hectares, and we've got monitoring underway as we speak. We've done the first 2 months of rodent monitoring in the kokako block, and at 0 in the tracking tunnels, we've got a network of trail cameras set up, both using two different protocols. One, a national predator control protocol that also has acoustic recorders, and another, a draft protocol that Doc's working on to see if how well trail cams can be used for small mammal monitoring. And possum monitoring will begin next week over the whole of the forest, and stoat monitoring, as well as using trail cams, we're just using the other more conventional methods. But yeah, looking forward to when we can have detection methods that we can rely on, because a lot of the monitoring, it's got its limitations. So the more we can have confidence and know that there's a high precision with our detection, the better. So looking forward to that stuff coming through. So I'm just going to touch on kokako, which we do annual possum, rat, and stoat control in that kokako area. Are especially vulnerable to predation and almost disappeared from Waipoua. They need possums, rats, and stoats at near zero throughout that vulnerable nesting season, which is from mid-October through to March on average. But kokako without interference can produce multiple chicks, so they can recover fairly quick if the elements come together. In the forest, productivity is good, and that interference from predators and browsers is down. This is just a graph that shows the bars show the number of kokako pairs going back to the 1990 through to the last full census in 2016-17. And the green arrows are when an aerial 1080 occurred, and the blue is a ground-based 1080. And in the years in between from 95 onwards, there was just targeted nest protection that built more to that 1,000-hectare bait station network we've got now. So it is a combination of all methods. This is an example of what we're using now. It's old school, but it's working. It's similar to what Liam was talking about in Monganui. We've got a bait-safe bait station, which was trialled at the Trouncin Cody Park Mainland Island project, which is just to the south of Waipoua, as well as a fill-proof for deploying mainly first-generation anticoagulants for rats, but also it's used periodically for 1080. And Starline bait stations using Ferritox bio bags, but it could be used for other stuff. So we've got those on a 100 by 100 network over that 1,000 hectares, but we're going to expand that to a 2 per hectare from the current 1 per hectare at the moment. Kiwi are also recovering with both aerial and ground predator control. The data we have to show that was based not so much on the kill counts, which is useful, but it was a lot of work after the 2005 and then especially 2011 was using kiwi dogs with experienced handlers to search a defined area and look at the proportion of juvenile kiwi to adult kiwi, with a certain proportion of juvenile kiwi for a healthy population, and for a population in big trouble there would be no juvenile. And yeah, big improvements there. We've had to put that monitoring method on hold because the area that kiwi are monitored is a lot of Cody and Cody dieback, and that was quite an intensive on the ground scrambling through trees. So we're having to tailor our methods that don't put Cody under threat. So we're working on that at the moment. And that's us, Iwi Te Roroa, with the Tito Whenua Project, Northland Regional Council. So we, as a whole lot of us, are increasing the areas under sustained ground possum and stoat control in the significant areas of lowland forest. This is the map that Liam and Courtney showed up before, and here's a bit more detail with all of those red dots being bait stations, and there's double set Dock 200s throughout that network as well. And similar to Liam's map, here is some of the bait stations I checked a couple years back that whilst this new technology is going to be great, and I'm looking forward to it being available and working with a lot of efficacy and being affordable, in the meantime, using conventional tools, we're getting good results. So this is a bait station with pre-feed and Ferritox pellets. These same bait stations can use a lot of different products, but it's primarily targeted at possums because of Cody dieback. Like Liam said, we don't have the bait stations at a density to have useful, effective control on rodents. it's just another view of Waipoua, which shows that we've got a network of roads, like the state highway that runs through the middle, and here's Waipoua settlement road. So there's certain areas where we can do ground control quite effectively, and there's not much kauri or kauri dieback. So we can do ground control for that annual sustained control, but there's vast areas like you see in the background where there's kauri dieback. It's not very effective to get there often, especially if you're having to wear over booties. You can't even do it in the winter months. So we're sort of using a combination of methods. And that's the end. But very keen to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. It's awesome to hear about the kokako. I actually saw, first time for me, saw two kokako in the wild in Tiritiri Matangi a couple of weeks ago, and it'd be so great to get them back thriving in Northland. So we've got one sort of question or comment from Joseph that says, when now people hear about 1080 in the Muri Whenua, they cringe straight away. Maybe some education around how to administer 1080 would go a long way. Example, puri ora statistics on where they have administered 1080 and what it looks like now. So it's probably quite a big question in terms of how you've approached getting everyone on board to using 1080 in Waipoua, and any sort of tips that you can share that have helped, or is it just a long process time and building those relationships?
Well, I suppose maybe Waipoua is unique in that it was the Forest Services headquarters, going back from the old days through to work, and it was always involved quite closely with Pananawi and Matatina marae, which are in the Waipoua marae, and a lot of the kaimahi for the department and the Forest Service were from those marae, the home people, and they were working on the ground with that first operation in 1990. But prior to that, they were seeing the impact of possums on their forest through the 80s. So they were part of that initial movement for that first aerial 1080 in 1990. It was pretty much, they were saying we need to do something about this. And again, 2005, when they saw that the rotational ground control wasn't working, they could see Rako just in decline, that it was getting good results over 1,000 hectare block each year and then moving to another one, but it just wasn't doing enough quick enough. It's something that their, I suppose, Kaumātua and Kaimahi were the ones directly working with the department. And in fact, again in 2011, and this year, it was people from those marae that were pretty much telling Doc, we need to do something, and this 1080 works. So we weren't having to, I suppose, start from scratch. There was those same people that were there in the 80s are still there now. The people that were, I suppose, Kaimahi in the 80s are now Kaumātua, and people that listen, and they're the ones that said, look, we've seen it work, we've lived through it. The negative effects of possums as one of the small invasive mammals, and we've seen the benefit of when they're controlled well. We've seen 1080 work. We haven't seen this decline that people talk about on social media. We don't know what they're talking about. And so I suppose that real life experience and that real life experiences through it is hard to repeat, because that's going back from the 80s through to now. So that's not something you can package up in a online resource and send off to another community and hope that will work. That took I suppose years of having people from the home people working on the team and part of the decision making. Like, for example, one of the guys who was a keen advocate for this latest one from one of the Pananawi marae, he ran the 2005 operation. He now was totally independent from the department, but he said this is what we need to do. So it was, if anything, we wouldn't have got this through if it wasn't for that strong leadership from the home people. It's as simple as that. If we didn't have that support, if we were having to start from scratch, I would say we'd have some great monitoring data showing how that forest was slipping into major decline, and that's as far as we'd go. So to go to that next step, I can't really give you solutions other than to know what we're doing next week is there's a group from the East Coast coming over to Waipoua to hear from the Te Roroa team on their experiences. So that's better than hearing it from a turkey like me. No offense to myself, but I mean, to hear it from people that live in the community, that have been there from the start, that ancestors have been there hundreds of years, who care about the forest more than anyone, is probably what it comes down to. And given that most of these other forests around the north haven't had regular 1080, those experiences are probably not there, or maybe there's just negative experiences they have. So to get that momentum for that positive experience story like there is in Waipoua, where there's been a gap between 2011 and 2014 and now, but there's still that collective memory of the good experiences right there.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Hey, can I get you to stop sharing your screen? Because I think we're getting double Danny on the screen at the moment. Cool. And Liam from Te Toa Whenua has said, hi Matt, awesome talk. We've got our new kai Mahi Tahi with us. Would you be able to describe how aerial operations mitigate spread into rivers and streams within Waipoua specifically?
How they mitigate what?
Spread into rivers and streams.
Well, I mean, I suppose how we use 1080 and how we use 1080 in the science we have is that it's water soluble and I suppose dissolves to such low concentrations when it does hit the water. We're not denying that it doesn't go into streams, and we're saying that's not an impact. We've got extensive stream fauna monitoring that's occurring in Waipoua on species like tuna, kiwi. There's been untold water samples. It's not a threat to water and streams is what we're saying. I mean, so we're not trying to avoid it going into streams because, yeah, it's not the evidence that it's got the impact.
Cool, thank you. Okay, well, we've gone a little bit over time, but thanks, Matt. That's really awesome.